what do you make of the two major proposals, one from the governing JLP to lessen the tax from 25 to 15%, and then from the PNP for the movement in the threshold to 3.5 million. Which of the two is even workable, and what is it going to cost if you've crunched those numbers?
Okay, let me just first say, I'm speaking here as former chair of EPOC. We have not had the deliberations at the Fiscal Advisory Committee for me to speak publicly on the matter as chairman of the Fiscal Advisory Committee, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to speak here as former chair of EPOC and as a private citizen of Jamaica.
Yes.
Okay?
Appreciate that.
And all right, and so let's get right into it. Now, I would say both programs are highly aspirational, right? But it comes right down to what can Jamaica afford? What can our taxpayers afford? Do we have the fiscal space to accommodate these aspirational plans of both the PNP and the JLP, right? And we would have to look at the composition of the budget, revenues, and the expenditures, right? To make a determination as to if we do have the fiscal space, do we have the money to be able to do so?
Right.
Right? I think we have been here once before in 2016, where
1.5
moved to 1.5, and the opposition at the time thought that they would have identified sources of funding for the increase to the 1.5 million, the threshold. And as it turned out, there would have had to be offsetting taxation measures put in place to offset the increase. They called it revenue neutral at the time. Since then, there have been no new taxes, but it was called revenue neutral. So
how did they pay for the 1.5, you said?
They had the revenue measures. I believe they got rid of the oil hedge, and they put a tax on STT tax on gasoline, right? Among other measures. Remember, they had to put in offsetting taxation measures for the increase in the threshold for the revenue loss in the increase in the threshold. Remember, and it had to be phased in.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it seems we're at that point again, right? Running up into a general election, a very important and consequential general election. Right? So therefore, for me, these are aspirational, these are nice to have, but do we have the money as a country to accommodate revenues that are going to be lost from these tax reform measures?
Let's take the 3.5 for a start.
Right.
I hear Julian Robinson talking of the first thing. They have this term called discretionary expenditure. I trust you've heard the use of that phrase.
Yes, ma'am.
And it seems to me that what is being called discretionary expenditure, there is this 360 billion, I believe, that is being talked about.
Yes.
And do you know how that is arrived at?
Well, if you look at the budget and how it is composed, right? So firstly, you have your wages and salaries.
Yes.
Right? You must pay your government workers, right?
Yes.
And right now at this point in time, there would be a lot of risk around this number here, the numbers that we have forecasted in the fiscal policy paper for wages and salaries, inclusive of employee contributions. So let's assume that these measures kick in 26-27, in the new budget year 26-27, right? Because we're winding up 25-26. By the time the new government is formed, they will be crafting their budget around their reforms, right? So therefore, we have to account for compensation of employees, and that is we know the risk to this number. However, it is forecasted for 526 billion and 560 billion, right?
526 billion is the forecast for 26-27. So
right?
at the moment, I believe what has been approved for salaries for this fiscal year 25-26 is 495.8, and you are saying for the next fiscal year we're looking at 526, so that's a jump of nearly 30 billion for salaries only. Let me take a break. talking with the former head of the Economic Program Oversight Committee, Keith Duncan, talking with him, getting his personal views on the proposals now. So you're telling us, Mr. Duncan, that for the next fiscal year 26-27, it is projected that salaries, based on the negotiations now, could go up to 526 billion
or more.
Or more.
So let me start from the top, Emily. Let me not start from let's look at the revenues and the expenditures.
Yes.
So total revenues, inflows of revenues forecasted in the fiscal policy paper for 26-27 is $1.1 trillion.
Yes.
Total expenditures are $1.137 trillion. That means we're running a fiscal deficit, our forecasted program to run a fiscal deficit already of $34 billion, right?
Yes.
Okay, so before any of these measures that are being proposed, we have a fiscal deficit that we're running, which is allowable under the fiscal rule, right? If we exceed this, then we could be possibly breaching the fiscal rule. So, right? Therefore, that is in terms of the reduction of debt to GDP and running a fiscal balance according to that formula that we should run.
Yes.
Right? So we're allowed to run this fiscal deficit as a country.
Yes.
No. So therefore, let's break down the recurrent expenditures.
Yes.
Now, right? So the expenditures are made up of programs, which are $364 billion program for 26-27. Compensation of employees, $526 billion. Interest costs, $170 billion, and capital expenditure, $75.6 billion. That's how the expenditure. So these expenditures are already forecasted, right?
Yes.
So therefore, we're already running a deficit forecasted for 26-27. Now we have these two proposals on the table, right?
Right. So is the 364, which is what they're calling the discretionary expenses?
Yes, that's exactly the area that they're looking at.
What makes up the discretionary expenses
I would say the discretionary expenses, what I would call is the operation expenses of government and other major expenses, right? So in the fiscal policy paper, we see one cut of the programs, and it will be broken down in terms of the $364 billion. We've broken down as travel expenses and subsistence, $14 billion, rental of property and machinery, $12 billion, utilities and communication services, $20 billion, use of goods and services procured by the government of Jamaica, all the ministries, departments, and agencies. And these are expenses for all the ministries, departments, and agencies, right? $125 billion, that is all the goods and services that they procure as a government, right? Then you have grants, contributions, and subsidiaries. Included in these grants, contribution, and subsidies would be like your social programs, which is like $30 billion, your education, your operational expenses of your Ministry of Education, like $40 billion.
Yes. Your
subventions for UE, UTech, that's $17 billion. The justice system, courts and court administration, $12 billion. Transportation,
JUTC and so, mobile metro.
$11 billion. Health, drugs, operation expenses, etc. $19 billion. Local government sets $7 billion. Road maintenance would be about $4 billion. The solid waste management about $3 billion, right?
Yes.
So when you look at and so that's inside of the number what we call the grants, contributions, and subsidies, right?
Right.
Then you have your retirement benefits that are paid to your retired government of Jamaica employees. That's $47 billion, right?
Right.
Okay. Then you have your awards and social assistance. This would be like your social programs, etc. That would be another $28.8 billion, right? So inside of these numbers, this is what is termed discretionary.
But when you read out that list to me, which of those is cuttable?
Well, this is the difficulty that it would be very difficult. The degrees of freedom are very limited inside of discretionary spend. right? Now, where could you possibly cut?
Yes.
Would you cut because just to run the ministry, the expenses to run the ministry and to deliver services to the people of Jamaica,
Yeah.
that's the use of goods and services, because you're acquiring goods and services to run your ministry so you can deliver goods and services to the people.
Right.
Right? You rent property,
You have to pay rent.
that is your premises that the government of Jamaica would occupy. Maybe you could cut back on travel and expenses somewhat, a little bit, but in terms of the tremendous cost of the either proposal, either the increase to the threshold, which has an annual cost of Julian, the opposition spokesperson of finance, said 55 billion. But I think it's somewhere north of that number, because each 100,000 increase is about approximately 4.5 billion. So it's somewhere probably in the $70 billion range, right? And that's annually. Under the JLP proposal, in terms of if you were to do it as a one time, it would be $28 to $44 billion annually. Therefore, you'd really have very limited space to be able to afford any of those, right?
Right. So where we're told for the PNP about the 140 billion that is forecast for the next 3 years,
right.
You are telling us that for the next fiscal year, based on revenue, when you match it up with expenses, we're already at a deficit, even with the forecast for the 140 billion over 3 years.
So let's look at the growth in tax revenues.
Yes.
Right? Because tax revenues grow by what you call nominal GDP growth.
Yes.
Right? So therefore, if we're forecasted to grow at, say, 1% next year and inflation is forecasted at 5%, those increase in price of goods and services, you get that through tax revenues. So you get an inflationary component in your growth in tax and revenues. But you also have that on the expense side, because all that you're procuring as a government, and wages and salaries, prices also go up.
Yeah.
So that is not like room that we have. That room is already accounted for in terms of increasing the cost of delivering programs, the cost of assuming that you're going to your government, your public sector will get inflationary increases or to keep pace, and even with your past benefits, because the past numbers are inside of these programs in the
so-called discretionary spending.
Right, and even that you have to keep pace with inflation, so you don't erode purchasing power.
Right.
So therefore, that 140 billion is not nearly room that's necessarily available.
How far is it compounded as well when we hear of the PNP's plan to not take the 11.4 billion from the NHT?
Well, that would be, and plus the other measures that both the PNP and JLP have proposed.
Yeah.
Right. That these are actually measures that are going to reduce revenues.
Yes.
Right, and those are the NHT will be a non-tax revenue that will be reduced.
What about the plan to grow the economy for greater than 1%? When have we ever grown to? About what level of economic growth would we require yearly to even have money to support any of the programs as proposed?
So, let's say, I'm not sure exactly this phased approach. I know that the Jamaica Labour Party put forward a phased approach to the introduction of the 15% base rate on personal income tax. That it would be a phased approach, and I believe what I heard Julian saying in debate was that not everything we're going to have to do at one time. So I'm not sure exactly what their plan is, but we definitely know that for sure that the fiscal space is extremely limited, and it would be it would be extremely difficult unless you are to carve out any level of expenditure cuts significant to match up with the revenues lost under either proposal. So therefore, it has to be phased.
So
it would have to be phased, and it would have to be accommodated with either additional taxation measures that like was done in 2016, because you don't want to increase your deficit beyond the fiscal balance that you're allowed to run.
Yes.
Right, and therefore, if you run a deficit, then you're going to have to borrow to finance that deficit.
Wow.
Now, if you're going to introduce taxation measures, which both parties have said they aren't, right, then you're going to have to cut expenditures, and as the numbers demonstrate, you don't have the room to cut.
I have to leave it there. I do hope you will write about this, because this is too important for it not to be documented, Mr. Duncan. All the best to you. Thank you so much. Keith Duncan, speaking in his personal capacity. He was previous chair of the Economic Program Oversight Committee. Its headline staff.
Jesus!